Let me just say at the outset that, and I will be introducing, obviously, all of our distinguished witnesses after opening statements, but I just want to welcome back to the U.S. House of Representatives a 17-term, 34-year member of the House, Frank Wolf, who is truly the William Wilberforce of the U.S. Congress. He continues that work now, as we all know, as the Distinguished Senior Fellow for the 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative and the Jerry and Susie Wilson Chair in Religious Freedom at Baylor University. Frank Wolf, as I think many of you know, is the author of the landmark law on religious freedom. It's called the International Religious Freedom of 1998. That legislation was strongly opposed by the Clinton administration. I remember chairing hearings on it. He wrote the language and did a magnificent job shepherding it both through the House and the Senate, but it was opposed by the administration. But at the end of the day, with a nose up, the president, in this case President Clinton, signed it, and it has made all the difference in the world. And as I think many of you know, it not only created the International Religious Freedom Office and obviously established a number of mutually reinforcing sanctions, 18 of them, that now the president has in his toolbox to promote religious freedom, but it also established an independent commission, the purpose of which is to really advise Congress and, frankly, the president to be a clear, non-ambiguous voice about religious freedom. And all of that, every bit of that, is attributable to Frank Wolf. And I want to thank him again for that extraordinary effort. You know, I saw firsthand his devotion to human rights on a myriad of ways, including trips with Frank to prison camps all over the world, including in the Soviet Union, the infamous Perm Camp 35, where Natan Sharansky spent so many years of his life and other political prisoners, a godforsaken place in Perm Oblast, a place that no Americans had been to simply because it was off limits to everyone. Over the course of 2 years, he negotiated his way, and I joined him, to Perm Camp, where we met with prisoners, videotaped them, and one by one, they actually got out of that prison camp. I saw it again when we were in a gulag in China, Beijing prison number 1. There were at least 40 Tiananmen Square activists there who were doing servitude. They were truly being exploited. And that was closed, that Beijing prison number 1, because Frank had the good sense to ask the warden, his name was Joe, for a box of what they were producing there, socks and jelly shoes, which were all the rage among young girls at the time in this country and in Europe, for export. He brought that over to the commissioner to the State Department. They put an import ban on it, and Beijing prison number 1 closed its doors because we have a law that precludes importation of slave-made goods. That was Frank Wolf. We saw it again in Vukovar, a city that was under siege by Slobodan Milosevic. After that, we met with Slobodan Milosevic, and he lied through his teeth, war criminal that he is, and made strong and persistent efforts to mitigate the effects of that war, because right after Croatia, which is where Vukovar is, they went into Bosnia and did more killing. But Frank was right at the forefront of that. And Romania and so many other countries. And Africa, the first member of Congress to push so aggressively, and Sam Brownback was part of that effort as well, to say that in Sudan, there is a genocide going on, and we not only need to raise our voices, we need to put into place policies that will hopefully end that genocide. So Frank Wolf is truly a leader. He's a man of deep Christian faith. He walks the walk in a way worthy of his calling. He also chaired, as I think many of you may know, several appropriations committees, including Commerce, Justice, and Science, his last perch, leadership post, and wrote a number of laws, including 9 major appropriations bills. So a man of great legislative accomplishment, but it's his heart for the weak and disenfranchised and his advocacy for religious freedom that has and continues to make all the difference in the world. So, Mr. Wolf, welcome. Nigeria is Africa's most populous country, as we all know, with more than 180 million people, roughly divided between Muslims and Christians and including numerous ethnic groups. Nigeria's Muslim population is among the largest in the world and has likely overtaken Egypt as the largest on the continent. Lagos, its commercial center, is among the world's largest cities. Nigeria also is Africa's largest economy and largest oil producer. Nigeria has long been a top troop contributor to UN peacekeeping operations and is a major political force on the continent. I would note parenthetically, one time in Darfur, I myself hooked up with a group of peacekeepers, and they were from Nigeria. I was in Sarajevo during the Balkan War. There was the same man, Major Jumbo, who ended up being in Darfur as well. So they really have distinguished themselves as providers of peacekeepers who have done great work around the world. Unfortunately, that stability that they have striven for has been under increasing threat in recent years. Disgruntled elements of mostly Muslim Canary ethnic group in 2003 created Boko Haram, a violent extremist group based in the Northeast. Boko Haram is considered the deadliest terrorist group in the world, responsible for 6,664 deaths last year alone. Neglect of the region has limited potential support of the Kanuris and other ethnic groups for government efforts to combat the terror threats in northern Nigeria. Elsewhere in northern Nigeria, Fulani herdsmen have clashed with a multitude of ethnic groups of farmers, multi-ethnic farmers, leaving 3,000 people dead since 2010. Meanwhile, the growing number of confrontational Shiites in northern Nigeria recently resulted in a December 2015 massacre in Zaria in Kaduna State, in which as a not yet undetermined number of civilians and military were killed. The number of dead is believed to be in the hundreds, but there are several ongoing investigations of this incident. This subcommittee has long held hearings, many hearings, on various aspects of Nigeria's situation, including specifically attacks by Boko Haram. Staff Director Greg Simpkins and I have visited Abuja and Jos several times, and in Jos, a city where numerous churches were firebombed by Boko Haram, and I know Mr. Wolf has just been there with his delegation. Today's hearing will examine the ongoing fight against the terrorist group, Boko Haram, and other conflicts in northern Nigeria, in an effort to determine the best way for the U.S. government to help address these challenges in the context of our overall Nigeria policy. The Nigerian government has struggled to respond to the continuing threat posed by Boko Haram. U.S. officials have expressed continuing concern about Boko Haram's impact in Nigeria and neighboring countries and its ties with other extremist groups, notably the self-proclaimed Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, to which Boko Haram pledged allegiance in 2015. The recruitment of Nigerians by other transnational terrorist groups also has been a concern. The State Department designated Boko Haram and a splinter faction and Saru as foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs, in November of 2013, following sustained efforts by this subcommittee. I would note parenthetically, the day we were going to mark up a resolution that I had introduced to so designate, they made that proclamation. It was 2 to 3 years late in coming. The U.S. government has made every effort to support Nigeria's battle against Boko Haram, but our counterterrorism training was suspended by the previous Nigerian government. It has been resumed, I'm happy to say, and it is much needed. Boko Haram commenced a territorial offensive in mid-2014 that Nigerian forces struggled to reverse until early 2015, when regional military forces, primarily from neighboring Chad, launched an offensive against the group. The Nigerian army has since reclaimed most of the territory, although many areas remain insecure. One of our witnesses today, Emmanuel Ogebe, recently told of his meeting with a Christian woman named Saratu in a refugee camp in northern Nigeria. Quote, she had just returned from searching for her 4 children, ages 14, 11, 8, and 7, who had been abducted by Boko Haram from an attack on her town in 2014. She traveled to the front lines, he went on to say, asking soldiers if they saw her kids. She went to IDP camps, This is the life of many in today in northern Nigeria. We recently commemorated the tragic 2-year anniversary of the kidnapping of nearly 300 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok in northeastern Nigeria. We have with us today Saha, one of the girls who escaped this mass kidnapping. But many of her classmates were not so fortunate. Many of these schoolgirls are believed to have been forced to convert to Islam and married to Boko Haram fighters or prostituted by this egregious group. We now receive reports that some of them may be used as suicide bombers. As the menace posed by Boko Haram was not enough of a challenge for the government of President Buhari, there is the growing crisis in Nigeria's middle belt, largely caused by clashes between Fulani herdsmen and a multi-ethnic group of farmers. Some of the violence is a result of conflicts over cattle rustling on encroachment on private lands. Nevertheless, according to the current Global Terrorism Index, Fulani militants operating in Nigeria and Central African Republic are considered the fourth deadliest militant group in Africa, behind Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and Al-Shabaab. More recently, a new threat has been added to the volatile northern region. Although the majority of Nigerian Muslims are Sunni, there are between 1 and 3 million Shia consecrated in Kano, Nasarawa, and Kaduna states. Member of the recent staff delegations that visited Kaduna found a high level of concern by Sunni Muslim leaders about what they described as an assertive Shia presence reportedly supported by Iran. Since the 1980s, the Shiite Islamic Movement of Nigeria, or IMN, has existed as a state within a state. Despite being a professed nonviolent movement, the IMN has made itself a public nuisance, blocking roads on the days they have processions, thus preventing citizens from accessing medical care in a timely fashion. It is for these social and religious reasons why the group is not sympathetic, even in light of what is believed to have occurred last December. Although the details of what happened in the town of Zaria appear to be murky, the U.S. Embassy believes that Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Tukur Borate was attending a graduation ceremony in Zaria during the anticipated IMN religious procession. A Nigerian security force deployed to protect Borate's route had an altercation with IMN members, claiming that there was an assassination attempt on Borate. The Nigerian military opened fire. Again, the exact number of people killed is not known, but this is a very serious potential escalation in that region.